You know that feeling when you're setting up your investment account for the first time and you see that little toggle switch that says reinvest dividends versus receive as cash, and you think to yourself, well, I could use some extra money each month. So you flip it to cash, and suddenly you're getting these little deposits. $50 here, 100 there. It feels like free money, right? Like your investments are finally working for you, sending you these tiny paychecks just for owning stocks. But here's the thing nobody's telling you. That innocent little switch you just flipped might be the single most expensive financial decision you'll ever make. And the crazy part? The cost doesn't show up anywhere on your statement. My name is Sam, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, specifically how our brains trick us into making terrible financial decisions that feel amazing in the moment. If you're someone who wants to actually build life-changing wealth instead of just feeling like you're making progress, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it ends up changing how you think about that dividend received notification. Most financial gurus will tell you that dividend investing is this smart, conservative strategy. Cash flow is king, they say. Build that passive income stream. You've probably seen the YouTube thumbnails, how I make $2,000 a month in dividends. The conventional wisdom says taking dividends as cash is the whole point. That's literally why people buy dividend stocks in the first place. Get those quarterly payments, live off your investments like some sort of financial genius. But here's what they're missing, and honestly, it drives me crazy. They're confusing the harvest with the planting. There's this massive psychological blind spot happening when you choose cash over reinvestment. And it's not just about some boring compound interest concept your finance professor tried to explain. It's about how your brain processes immediate rewards versus delayed gratification, and how that one little toggle switch is secretly training you to think like someone who will never build serious wealth. Here's my core thesis, and I want you to really think about this. Taking dividends as cash creates a psychological addiction to feeling like you're making money, while simultaneously preventing you from actually making money. It's the financial equivalent of eating your seed corn. You get the immediate satisfaction of income hitting your account, but you're literally interrupting the only mechanism that can make you wealthy, exponential compound growth. Think of it like this. Your investment portfolio is like a tree. Dividends are the fruit. When you reinvest dividends, you're taking those seeds and planting more trees. Over time, you don't just have one tree, you have an orchard. But when you take dividends as cash, you're eating the fruit, which feels great in the moment, but you're stuck with the same single tree forever. And here's the kicker. That tree isn't growing faster just because you're eating its fruit. The psychological shift that happens when you flip that switch from reinvest to cash is the actual turning point between becoming wealthy and staying trapped in what I call middle-class purgatory. When you don't have automatic reinvestment turned on, your brain operates in scarcity-based survival mode. Every time that dividend payment hits your account, your brain releases dopamine, the same neurochemical reward you get from social media likes or winning at a slot machine. Your brain interprets it as I made money today. But here's what's actually happening on your brokerage statement. Nothing productive. Here's what's actually happening. Research from behavioral finance shows that on the day a stock pays a dividend, its price drops by almost exactly the dividend amount. It's called going ex-dividend. So if you owned a stock worth $100 and it pays a $2 dividend, the stock is now worth $98 and you have $2 in cash. You didn't make money. You just moved money from one pocket to another. But your brain doesn't see it that way. Your brain sees money appeared and gives you a reward. This is why the dividend cash option is so psychologically dangerous. It creates this illusion of productivity when literally nothing productive happened. And the more you experience that dopamine hit, the more your brain craves it. You start checking your account more often. You start calculating your monthly passive income, even though that income is just your own capital being returned to you. Let me give you an example. I know someone, let's call him Marcus, who was so proud of his dividend strategy. He'd set up his portfolio to generate about $500 a month in dividend income, and he'd use that money for weekend expenses. He felt like he was living the dream. My investments are paying me, he'd say. Meanwhile, his friend Sarah was reinvesting every dividend automatically. Fast forward 10 years. His portfolio grew, sure, but Sarah's absolutely crushed his. We're talking about a difference of over $150,000 on similar initial investments. Same time period, same market conditions. The only difference? Sarah never interrupted the compounding process. Think about that for a second. $150,000. That's not because Sarah was smarter or picked better stocks. It's because she didn't give her brain the satisfaction of seeing income every quarter. When you take dividends as cash, you're training yourself to think of investments as an income source rather than a wealth building tool. And that identity shift is huge. People who think of investments as income sources behave completely differently than people who think of investments as wealth building engines. The income-focused investor is constantly looking for yield, chasing dividend stocks, maybe even taking on more risk to maintain their monthly payment. The wealth-focused investor is looking at total return, tax efficiency, and long-term compound growth. These are fundamentally different mindsets, and the dividend cash option pushes you toward the first one without you even realizing it. When you reinvest dividends, your identity starts shifting from consumer to capital allocator. You're not consuming your capital's production, you're forcing it back to work. You're becoming the type of person who can delay gratification for long-term gain. And honestly, that's the real psychological transformation. It's about training your brain to value actual wealth over the feeling of making money. Here's another psychological mechanism at play. When you take dividends as cash, you're constantly forcing yourself to make new investment decisions. Do I buy back in? Is the market too high? Should I wait? You're introducing what psychologists call decision fatigue. And frankly, human beings are terrible at making decisions under uncertainty. We panic. We hesitate. By automating the reinvestment, you remove your flawed human brain from the equation. You stop trying to time the market and start letting the market work for you. Every time you have to choose to reinvest, you're giving yourself a chance to mess it up. You're giving your fear and greed a seat at the table. When you automate it, you kick them out of the room. There's also this massive shift in how you see market volatility. When you reinvest dividends, you're dollar cost averaging without even trying. When the market crashes and everyone else is panicking, your dividends are buying more shares because the price is lower. You become an accumulation machine. You stop looking at red days as losses and start seeing them as sales. Does that make sense? We live in a culture that screams cash is king. Your friends, your family, they all want to know how much you made on that stock. It's hard to tell them, well, I didn't make anything I can spend. I just own zero point 0.4 more shares of Apple. It sounds boring, but real wealth is boring. Real wealth is quiet. The dividend cash option becomes this weird status symbol. Oh, my portfolio generates passive income is a flex. It signals that you're financially successful. But when you say, I just reinvest everything automatically, you sound like you're not benefiting from your investments at all. And humans are social creatures. We want to signal success. So the cash option feeds this need while actually preventing you from building real wealth. Sound familiar? Here's where the opportunity cost gets brutal. Let's say you have a portfolio that generates $3,000 a year in dividends. If you take that as cash and spend it, you get $3,000 of lifestyle enhancement, nice dinners, maybe a short vacation. But if you reinvest it at a conservative 7% annual return, that $3,000 turns into about $23,000 in 30 years according to compound interest calculations. Text to future value, $3,000 times 1.07 30s, 22,836. Now multiply that by 30 years of dividend payments. You're looking at the difference between having spent $90,000 on stuff you probably don't even remember versus having an additional portfolio worth potentially over $300,000. The income you're taking today is literally stealing from your future self's wealth. But here's where most people mess this up. They think, well, I'll just reinvest most of my dividends and take a little bit as cash. But that doesn't work psychologically. Because once you've experienced that dopamine hit of seeing dividend income, your brain wants more of it. It's like trying to eat just one cookie. Another huge mistake is what I call the yield trap. Because people get addicted to seeing cash hit their account, they start chasing bad companies just because they have high dividend yields. You've probably seen this. Someone buys a dying company just because it pays 8%. They think they're being smart. Look at all this passive income. But the stock price drops 20% because the business is failing. They're losing dollars to pick up pennies. There's also the tax drag nobody talks about. If you're doing this in a taxable account and you take the cash, you owe taxes on it that year. Even if you decide to reinvest it manually later, the government has already taken their cut. You're trying to roll a snowball uphill while someone melts it with a hairdryer. So we need a complete reframe. This isn't about dividend policy, it's about identity. You need to stop asking, how much income does my portfolio generate? And start asking, what is the total value of the machine I'm building? This is the opportunity cost framework. Every time you spend a dividend, you aren't just spending that $100. You're killing the potential of what that $100 could have grown into over the next 30 years. You need to become the type of person who is allergic to uninvested cash. The type of person who sees a dividend payment not as a reward, but as a soldier that has returned from battle and needs to be immediately redeployed. It's about understanding that you're not building a savings account, you're building walking away money, whether that's for your family or just for your future self to have the freedom to quit a toxic job without panic. Let's do a reality check with some math, because honestly, the numbers are shocking. The average dividend yield in the S&P 500 is around 1.5 to 2%. So if you have a $100,000 portfolio, you're generating maybe $2,000 a year in dividends. If you take that as cash for 30 years, you've received $60,000 total. But if you reinvest it and assume 7% total return, which is roughly in line with long-term S&P 500 returns according to Federal Reserve historical data, that $100,000 portfolio grows significantly more with reinvestment. Let's break this down step by step. Portfolio grows at roughly 5.5%, 7% total return, minus 1.5% dividend taken as cash. $100,000 at 5.5% for 30 years plus $504,993. Plus $60,000 in dividends taken sucks $564,993 total. Portfolio grows at full 7% total return. $100,000 at 7% for 30 years sucks $761,226. Tax difference sucks $761,000 to $564,993, $196,2033. That's nearly $200,000 difference. That's the cost of feeling like you're making money every quarter. Think about that for a second. That's the difference between retiring at 62 versus 67. That's the difference between traveling internationally twice a year versus once every few years. All because of a toggle switch you flipped when you were younger, because you wanted to feel like your investments were working for you. So, where does this leave you? It leaves you with a choice. And it's not just a financial choice, it's a psychological one. The core message is this: real financial freedom comes from understanding your own psychology around money and taking back control from these emotional shortcuts. You have to decide if you want to look rich or if you want to be rich. The dividend cash option is seductive. It whispers that you deserve a treat. It tells you that cash flow is safety. But now, you know the truth. Real safety is a portfolio that has compounded uninterrupted for decades. This is your turning point. You can go into your brokerage account settings right now, literally pause this video and do it, and find that button that says reinvest dividends or DRIP. It's a tiny checkbox. It takes 3 seconds to click. But that one click is a declaration of war against your own instant gratification. You become the kind of person who says, I'll decide how and when to take money from my portfolio when I actually need it. I don't need a corporate board to drip feed me permission slips to spend. You're trading short-term emotional hits for long-term capacity. And honestly, that psychological shift can be a genuine game changer. The choice is yours. You can keep taking dividends as cash and enjoy those quarterly dopamine hits while your future self stays stuck in middle-class purgatory. Or you can embrace the psychological discomfort of delayed gratification and actually build life-changing wealth. One path feels good now, the other path makes you free later. Don't let the dopamine hit of a $50 dividend rob you of $1 million future. Which version of yourself do you want to be?